Okay, again, we don't like intros. We are just gonna start. The title of this video is gonna be something along the lines of Detachment and Vulnerability. Um, I honestly don't have the title in my head yet, but it's gonna be something like that. It's probably gonna involve those two words because those are the two things I wanna talk about today. And I've brought notes, so we are getting serious now. Um, Also, hello, my name is Jack. Welcome. Love to have you here. I'm going to try and do these regularly. We're going to see how it goes. So, we're going to start with detachment and a little summary or like synopsis or whatever you want to call it, a little like summarization of why I want to talk about these two things is because I have started embracing them in the last month, week, day, hour. And I think they're important. They are helping me. They make me feel good. They make life better for me. So, and you don't hear about them on social media. That's basically another reason why I'm going to talk about these two. So, detachment. So, detachment is a state in which a person overcomes their emotional attachments or desires for things, people, or worldly concerns. And basically, if you have ever seen a white person go to Asia and then come back all zen and like, bro, I was in the temples and I was praying and like, we don't need all this materialism, man. Like, we don't need it. Like, it makes us a slave to things. Basically, that person is insufferable, but they're not wrong. We become attached to things in our life. We become um, attached with people in our life, and it's not good. Believe it or not, it's not good to be attached to these things. Um, Taoism, which is a Chinese philosophy, um, basically teaches that the reason attachment is bad is because nothing in this world is permanent. We are constantly changing. Our environments are changing. Things die. Things are born. Nothing is ever left in a state of like perpetual existence. You know, everything, even the mountains, crumble and rise. So, Taoists believe, and I don't mean to paraphrase or speak for the millions of Taoist um, practitioners or believers out there, but Taoists essentially believe that attaching yourself to worldly things or people or objects isn't good because it's only going to bring you suffering. Because if you're attached to something and it dies or it disappears or it breaks, that will cause a lot of sadness and suffering. So the solution to this problem or this issue or this particular type of suffering is to not be attached to these things, is to not gain or control or create an emotional attachment to things like that. Now, you might be thinking, Jax, this is really weird. How can you not be attached to people you love and people? And honestly, it's a good question. I don't exactly have the answer, but what I can tell you is that there is a difference between having a physical attachment to somebody and loving them. You can love somebody without attaching yourself to them. And the way you do that is from within. So if you can learn that self-love and preservation and really just focus on yourself and love yourself, um, that way you can end up loving everything. And then you don't have this horrible loss when you lose somebody, which is like, again, I'm roughly paraphrasing like 2,500 years of Chinese wisdom and philosophy, but it's a YouTube video. You clicked on it. What can I say? Um, yeah. And so detachment, the idea behind detachment is basically just that, is if you're not emotionally attached to things and objects, and it's not necessarily emotionally, you can be physically attached to something, you can be mentally attached to it, you can have this idea that you are attached to a concept, you know, like it doesn't have to be something, a physical object like a plant or a person. It can be your attached to the idea of like pure justice. You know, you are so attached to it. But then what happens when you're attached to something like that is you will read a news story or you will encounter something that isn't just, that is injustice. And that is going to make you very upset because you hold the idea of pure justice as this deep, deep attachment that you have. And so Taoists kind of try and detach themselves from all worldly beliefs, concepts, people, things, and it gives you an incredible amount of freedom. You know, it provides you with this degree of separation, which allows you to really appreciate the world and love every aspect of it, while not connecting yourself to these transitory things, these things that aren't going to last. You know, nobody lives forever. Nothing stays the same. Everything changes. Um, and so that's kind of the idea behind detachment. I will read you a quote and then we will move on. Detachment is an art of enjoying something while always being open to the possibility of losing it someday. So a truly detached person, and sometimes they call it non-attachment, detachment, non-attachment, just sounds better in some cases. But yeah, truly enjoying something, but understanding that that thing isn't gonna last. You know, you might go tomorrow. You, like, the person you love might go tomorrow. And while it's very sad, we understand that nothing lasts forever. And the fact that nothing lasts forever makes whatever is existing currently right now that much more special. Okay, so that was 6 and 7 minutes of talking about detachment. And do I feel confident about what I just said? Not really, but I enjoyed it, and hopefully it didn't just sound like autistic rambling. And before you come for me, yes, I'm autistic, so I'm allowed to say that. I think that's how that works. I don't know. I don't check these things. Next, we're going to talk about vulnerability. Sorry to anybody watching this still. I'm so sorry. Like, if you find joy out of this, maybe check yourself, because I don't quite know who's watching this, but I love you if you are watching this, and thank you for putting up with me. Vulnerability, the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being harmed. Now, I'm going to start this with an anecdote. So I have this uncle, and he's very much like a bushman. He lives in the bush with my aunt. They have a cattle ranch. He is very wild, very untamable. Most of my family kind of thinks that he's a little bit odd, but we all love him very dearly. And I remember being 15 or 16 years old, and he likes to talk philosophy. He likes to talk culture and science and technology, like all the cutting edge things he's interested in. And he's interested in like real conversations. He doesn't like that whole like, oh, how's the weather going? He likes to get deep. And so he turned to little 15-year-old Jax and said, you know, I was talking to this girl the other day, and she was trying to date these boys, and she said that she just wanted to find a man who was vulnerable. Why would she want a vulnerable man? That makes no sense. Like, vulnerability, that's weakness. That's dumb. I don't understand that. And that created sort of a lifelong interest in this idea of vulnerability, and why do some people like it and some people really, really hate it. So people like my uncle, who is rough and tumble and ready to go, and, you know, very bush oriented, very wild in some characteristics, and how some people how might view him. He views vulnerability as kind of a confusing idea, which makes sense. Kind of like, why would you want to be vulnerable? In nature, a vulnerable animal ends up dead. So what does it mean? Meanwhile, there are people on the opposite side of this spectrum who look at vulnerability and are absolutely enamored by it. They are totally pro vulnerability. They think it is super good. They like to see it in their children. They like to see it in their spouses. And they think that vulnerability is a really important concept or idea or ideal that people should have. So, some of my notes on vulnerability are: practicing vulnerability is exercising courage. It takes courage to be vulnerable. And then this other quote, which is, unless you can be totally self-sufficient, being vulnerable proves humility and self-awareness. Allowing others to see you with no walls up shows honesty, trust, and courage. And I think that is what gets to the root of why people like vulnerability. So the reason that someone might want to have a relationship with somebody who is vulnerable is that if you are willing to lower your walls and to show someone your weaknesses and just truly who you are, it might not necessarily be a weakness. It's just like, I'm showing you who I am. I'm putting myself out here. I'm going out on a limb and I'm showing you who I am. That is actually a very attractive quality. You know, I definitely agree that vulnerability is a force for good and a positive, because if someone is willing to show you who they are at their worst or what they are in their weakest form, that, like the quote says, it takes a lot of courage. It shows openness. The alternative to being vulnerable is being very closed off and not allowing anybody to see you at your worst, not allowing anybody to see your weaknesses or your difficulties, your past trauma. And so vulnerability is an important concept. And sorry to my uncle, but I am firmly on the pro vulnerability category. The last thing I've said here is, when someone shares their own vulnerability, treat it with respect and care. They have exposed something special. And this is sort of the final thing I want to talk about vulnerability, is that it is something that's very special. It is something that you should respect. When somebody tells you about something they went through during their childhood, or when somebody tells you something that they're really uncomfortable with, or a weakness that they have, it is kind of your job in that relationship to treat that with respect, to not gossip and go tell everybody, oh, look, this guy's afraid of clowns. Like, get over it. Like, don't judge me for being afraid of clowns. So it is a form of trust. To put yourself out there and to make yourself vulnerable is not fun. It can be really scary, especially when you become vulnerable to somebody and they don't treat it with respect, and they either make fun of you, they expose your vulnerability, they see you in a different light, they judge you for your vulnerability. And that can really hurt you, and it can close you off, and it can make it much harder to be vulnerable in the future, because it is only with vulnerability that we are able to get close. And what I was saying earlier about how it doesn't really make sense, vulnerability, you know, like an animal that's vulnerable in the wild will die. Well, humans are social animals, and the way we survive and the way we thrive in the world is by communities and by groups of people who have our back, who look after us, who take care of us on our bad days so that we can take care of them on their bad days. And one of the strong ways in which humans can connect socially and emotionally is through sharing vulnerabilities. And so I know your weaknesses, you know my weaknesses, and together we can overcome each other's weaknesses and survive, and hopefully the tribe or the civilization survives. So that is what I would say in a counter argument towards vulnerability being a bad thing. But I am very interested to know what you guys think. Vulnerability and detachment. What do you guys think? Do you think one is more important than the other? Do you think one of them isn't important at all? Do you think detachment is a total scam and it's just, you know, snake oil? Or maybe you think vulnerability is totally lame. But I want to know what you guys think. I'm very curious. I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm enjoying talking to you guys in these longer form videos. I'm sure if you're coming from TikTok, it must be rather strange that this boy who only talks about dating and relationships and stuff like that is talking about deep spiritual and philosophical content. But this is kind of like the stuff that I'm really interested in. And honestly, it's a good escape from dating and all of the boy trauma, and there's not any drama right now. I'm so boring, guys. Like, I'm sorry. I'm just this little philosopher boy sitting in his room talking to a camera and discussing deep philosophical questions that won't be answered in my lifetime or your lifetime. That being said, if you've made it this far, you are literally I don't have words to express how insanely cool you must be as a person to have put up with me and to have followed me through. Um, so definitely leave a comment. I want to know who you guys are. I want to talk to you guys. This the whole reason I'm doing this is so I can reach out to people and communicate and have like um, a community of people who don't have to necessarily understand where I'm at, and I don't have to understand necessarily exactly where you guys are, but we can be together in this vast ocean of information and social media. And I think that's pretty special and that's pretty cool. So I will stop rambling, but I hope you guys have an amazing day. I love you guys so much. Have fun. Do something today that is just for yourself. Um, yeah, just embrace being you. Try and detach from certain things. Like even if you just learn to detach yourself from one thing and just be like, you know what? I don't care about this thing anymore. I don't I don't have an emotional connection to this plant. I will take care of it, and if it dies, it dies. If it lives and thrives, it thrives. Um, but yes, have a beautiful day. I love you guys. Leave your comments. I want to hear you guys, and I will talk to you tomorrow.